Look, I've said some bad things about Donald Trump in the past. I've said some bad things about many politicians. But of course, I would never condone violence against a politician. I don't care what side of politics they're on or what their opinions or views are. In a democratic and free country, Trump and other politicians should be allowed to publicly state their views without fear of violence. So when I heard about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, as well as the murder of a volunteer firefighter, as well as 2 other people being critically injured, I was literally saddened. Not because I'm a Trump fan or anything like that, but just on a human level. I was not only sad for Trump, but sad for the whole United States. This is not where democracy should lead. Everyone should be upset by this, but unfortunately, that's not the case. I'll talk more on that soon. I actually first heard about this from my son, who asked me, "Why has Donald Trump got blood on his face?" I immediately knew something bad had happened if pictures of a bloodied Trump were popping up on his YouTube feed or whatever. After investigating, my first thought was, how the hell did a shooter get on top of a building which was only about 150 metres away from the stage? Why wasn't there an armed officer stationed on that building? Of course, conspiracy theorists started posing the same questions, and I don't blame them. The whole incident is either a complete failure of security or something more sinister. I'm hoping and guessing it was the former. A few hours after Trump was shot, I had to attend a party. I was speaking to a guy who I've often spoken to before, who's a real level-headed sort of guy. He's certainly not a lefty, probably more conservative than not. But he's pretty much apolitical. He tends to stay out of politics. But when I asked him if he had heard about what happened to Trump, he hadn't. I told him that he was shot in the head. The first thing he asked was, "Is he dead?" I said, "No, the bullet just grazed his ear. He's okay." He replied, "Darn, I was hoping he died. That was a real wasted opportunity." I couldn't believe it. This guy who, as I said, is normally a really reasonable guy who I've had many conversations with, a guy who's never shown much interest in politics, wished Trump had died. I couldn't believe somebody would be so insensitive to the death of another person. I didn't get angry with him, I just moved on the conversation and talked about something else. But this got me thinking, obviously there's lots of people out there who are so full of rage against Donald Trump that they wanted him to die. As I said, I'm no Trump fan, but I certainly don't hate the guy. I actually find him quite entertaining at times, but I would never wish him dead. Obviously, when Donald Trump got attacked, it wasn't just him being attacked, it was also his tens of millions of supporters, as well as the whole democratic process of the United States. For somebody to just gleefully wish that he had died, I just can't relate to that, no matter what I think of Trump or his policies. It doesn't even matter if I like the guy or not. I'm not American. It should be up to the American people to decide who their president is, not me or anybody else. If people don't like Donald Trump, well, don't vote for him. If you don't like Joe Biden, well, don't vote for him. But there's simply no place for political violence in a democracy, and if you think there should be, then you may as well go live in some sort of tin pot dictatorship where anything goes, because that's essentially what you're endorsing if you're endorsing the murder of a former president and presidential candidate. Jack Black's bandmate Kyle Gass was on stage in Sydney when Gass was asked to make a wish after being presented with a cake for his 64th birthday. He replied, "Don't miss Trump next time," with many in the crowd laughing. He later apologised on Instagram. "The line I improvised on stage Sunday night in Sydney was highly inappropriate, dangerous and a terrible mistake. I don't condone violence of any kind in any form against anyone." Noting that only last month, Jack Black was on stage endorsing Joe Biden for president, stating, "When democracy is at stake, Jack Black answers the call," presumably indicating that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. You don't have to look very far to find people who are upset by the survival of Donald Trump. This lady carried a makeshift cardboard sign that read, "Wishing Trump a long, terrible recovery," not far from the hospital where Trump was being treated after the incident. Dr. Karen Pinder, who has since deleted her entire account, wrote, "Damn, so close, too bad. What a glorious day this could have been." An actual doctor, who is apparently in the business of saving people, wishes a former president dead. When President Trump caught COVID, so many people were hoping he'd die. "For once, I'm rooting for the virus. Laughed my ass off. Trump gonna die. I'm worried this might interfere with my dream of seeing him die in prison." These people are not very nice people. They claim to be progressive and supporters of human rights for all, but they wish for people who disagree with them to die. Remember when Joe Biden said, "You have Trump and his MAGA supporters not only embrace political violence, but they laugh about it." Remember when American comedian Kathy Griffin held up a bloodied fake head of Donald Trump? What about the BBC presenter who called for Trump to be murdered by Biden on the basis that he's a threat to America's security? Of course, that post has since been deleted, with the presenter claiming it was satire. If it was satire, keep it up. Why delete it? I could go on, but you get the idea. These people aren't defenders of democracy, they're the opposite. If people don't agree with their views, they want them dead, even if it's just in a tongue-in-cheek way. Of course, there was talk about the Secret Service's diversity, equity and inclusion policies after video from the attack shows several female agents who were not large enough to cover Trump's body huddle to protect him from fire, leaving Trump exposed. There was footage of another agent fumbling with her pistol, incapable of finding her holster, as well as another agent who appeared uncertain about what to do. DEI is one thing when it comes to casting of TV commercials, but when it comes to the Secret Service, where actual lives are on the line, then obviously this experiment of DEI needs to end. My opinion is very clear. You hire the best person for the job. The moment you start introducing targets of how many people of certain ethnicities or gender you must have in your organisation is the moment you start discriminating against good candidates simply because they don't match the right identity. It's sexist, it's racist, it's all those things, so DEI clearly needs to be left to die. And this is not me being against women. Almost 90% of nurses are female. If we introduced a policy saying that 50% of nurses must be men by 2050, well, that would be equally bad. That means you'd be purposely turning down competent female candidates for less competent men just to make up the numbers. Clearly, not as many men want to take up nursing. It's just that simple. We shouldn't force it. And clearly, more men want to become Secret Service agents. We shouldn't try to force the opposite, unless you want more presidents to be shot at. Anyway, as I said, I don't wish harm on any politician or political candidate. I wish Trump well, and I also wish Biden well. It's not up to me, or a would-be assassin, who gets elected. It's up to the American people at the voting booth, the way it should be. And those who don't like this process, those who wish physical harm on their political opponents, well, clearly they don't like democracy.